All right, what is up, everybody? Eddie Barco here, and welcome once again to the Nebula Music Podcast. This is a show where I interview some of today's most inspiring and influential musicians, songwriters, and basically anybody who's doing something really cool in the music industry. I have them on the show with the goal of exploring their creative mindset. Today is a very special episode for me because I have somebody who I believe is incredibly talented, an amazing performer, and somebody who's going to do very big things in the music industry. I have Mr. Dylan Matthew joining me on today's episode. I first got introduced to Dylan's music maybe a little over a year ago, but very quickly I became an instant fan. His voice blew me away, his songwriting style blew me away, the way he performed blew me away. Everything. This man is very talented, and I knew right away that I needed to have him on the show. And so I'm excited that I get the opportunity to share his story on the Nebula Music Podcast. And frankly, I don't want to waste any more time. I just want to go ahead and dive right into the conversation. But before we do so, I want to go ahead and let you guys know that we have something very special on this episode. Mr. Dylan Matthew has an EP coming up very, very soon. And we're going to go ahead and feature his first single from that EP right here on the podcast. That's right. His single, Don't Forget. We're going to go ahead and feature it and premiere it here at the very end of the episode. So make sure to stick around after the interview because we're going to go ahead and play the whole entire song, Don't Forget. But let's not waste any more time. Let's go ahead and dive right into the conversation. All right, what is up, everybody? Eddie Barco here once again, and thanks again for joining me on a very, 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 very cool episode. I hope that I said enough varies because I absolutely and honestly mean it. I get a chance to interview some of the coolest people, as you guys know, and today I'm excited because I have somebody who's quickly become a bit of a role model to me, someone that I've looked up to, someone that actually in a very short amount of time, I just got into what he's doing, and I really just became not semi-obsessed, but definitely mostly totally obsessed with his skill level and the kind of creativity that this man brings to his craft. And so I'm just excited that I get the opportunity to sit down, have a little quick conversation with the one, the only, the very talented Mr. Dylan Matthew. Dylan, how are you, man?
I'm doing well, man. How you doing?
Oh, I'm excited, man. If you can't tell, I think I said like 6 varies. I'm very excited to have the opportunity to speak to you, my man. How's the quarantine treating you over there?
It's not too bad, you know. It's getting to the point where it's a little stir crazy, but overall, I mean, I think I have it better than a lot of other people because A, I'm healthy, and B, I usually work from home anyway, so I'm a little more accustomed to staying home rather than people that are always working somewhere else in an office or getting out. So you know, I'm doing better than I could ask for.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of randomly curious. Has this, obviously since you're kind of stuck at home all the time, very similar to the stuff that I do, but you're usually working from home or at least at a one spot. Has this environment that we're currently living in, has it helped you be a little bit more creative, or is it pretty much just the same as always?
In certain aspects, I would say it has. In certain aspects, I would say it has the opposite effect. Because half the time I'll say I'm here, I'm in my studio and I can't really leave. So it like kind of drives me to be working on stuff. But at the same time, on the other side of the mood spectrum, you can't leave. And so I'll start to get a little stir crazy, a little like antsy, and which will make me kind of almost feel more lethargic and not want to work on stuff. And then I feel like I'm just a scumbag and play too many video games.
Is that even a thing? I mean, come on, there's no such thing as playing too many video games. Not in this day and age, my man.
That's fair. That's very fair.
Yeah, dude. Well, I'm very grateful that I have you on the show and that we're going to take some time to pick your brain a little bit. I don't want to be the one who does most of the talking. I would much rather hear from you. So, Dylan, I'm just, like I usually begin, I'd like to know a little bit about where you're from, like maybe where you grew up and how you got started in music, and we'll sort of take it from there.
So I was born and raised in Temecula, California, which is like roughly 2 hours south of LA. It's like in between LA and San Diego. Wine country, very suburban. It's cool. It's a cool town. I still technically live here. I live in Murrieta right now, which is very close. It's like the sister city, whatever you want to call it. I like it out here a lot. It's close enough, but also far enough that it's not like a major city, and I don't have to deal with LA traffic or anything like that. But yeah, born and raised here. And what really got me into music was I would say mostly like being in my household. My dad was always very into music. He used to tour and write songs and release songs. And he was like touring with some big artists back in the day. And both my sisters sing. And so I kind of just grew up in like a musical household.
Yeah.
And music was just always like a big part of me since I was little. Like my grandma taught me how to play piano, and it just like kind of unraveled from there. But I didn't even know that I wanted to be a musician, or actually, I didn't know that I wanted to pursue music and that I actually could attempt it until I think I was 17, almost 18, when I finally was like, oh, I think I kind of want to try this music thing out. So it took me a while to realize that like that was the route that I wanted to go.
Can I ask you a quick question? Your dad, who was the touring musician, do you know some of these artists that he toured with? I imagine you know a couple, but is there some that you're willing to share?
Yeah. He toured with Ray Charles.
Oh, nice.
And Bonnie Raitt. And he did shows with, who is it? I can't think of it. It's a duo group. I think this is like one of the bigger shows he did, and I can't think of their name right now, and he's going to kill me. Shoot, I can't think of it.
You know what? Sometimes as you talk, it comes back.
Yeah.
But what I'm curious about is your dad, what instruments did he play? Or what instruments did he play?
He's a guitarist.
Nice.
And then he sings. So he's all like acoustic guitar and singing. He's very into like folk kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Acoustic folk style. Which is not necessarily the route that I went, but I was very into that style when I first started. When I first started like pursuing music, I was making very like Ed Sheeran-esque music, which is very slightly different than what I'm making now.
Not a bad place to start though. No,
it's a really well-rounded, like universal place I feel like to start, because you can kind of branch off that into anything.
Now, would you say that, I think you might have already answered that, but would you say that your dad's influences, or at least your family's influences, directly impacted why you decided to start more of the singer-songwriting route?
Yeah, definitely.
Now, do you think that's mainly because there's a couple little things here that I would like to pick at your brain, because it's just fascinating. First of all, the fact that you're from Temecula, to me, it's a very fascinating thing. For those of you guys who are not from California or from LA and don't really know the geography, first of all, California is huge. And I feel like it's split into like three major parts, right? That at least most people recognize. People think of Hollywood, LA, they think of San Francisco, and then they think of San Diego for the most part. And that's how most people think of California, in my experience. And Temecula is closer, I would say it's closer to San Diego than it is LA, but it's like inland, it's like inland, right? Like behind the mountains and stuff. And in my experience, I haven't met many people that are from that area, from Temecula specifically, that have pursued music or that have been very much impacted by music enough to want to pursue it as a career. And so not only is your dad clearly someone who's very experienced, but then you have now kind of picked up that mantle and started creating this career for yourself. I've also heard that I think Tori Kelly's from that area too, right? Like Marietta. So
yep, she's from Marietta. I've known her since I was little.
That to me boggles my mind. Like, is there a music scene that I have not heard of that's like in Marietta? I don't know, that maybe we're just not aware of?
I wouldn't say a massive one. There's kind of just a few people. There's definitely like musicians here, especially being with all the wineries and stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of live musicians of all ages that will do these kind of like bar gigs, winery gigs, more like the gigging lifestyle of music. There's quite a few of them. But for the like pursuing it as a career side, there's not too many. The only people I know that are like from here really pursuing it are like, well, Tori, who, I mean, she's a little past pursuing, but
a little bit.
And then this group called Temecula Road, which like is one of my best friends, and the other two are like good friends of mine. They actually just moved to Nashville, but they're like a country group from here, like a country pop duo or trio, sorry. But yeah, I don't know about anybody else that's really like fully pursuing it as a career. There's definitely people that are here that make music, but it's not necessarily like an underground scene or anything like that.
Right. Then that makes me a little bit curious. So then you started experimenting with music, and when most people, when they see what you've achieved, what you have created in, I don't even know, like a couple of years maybe, it's very impressive for anybody, really, especially, and I know people hear this story a lot, but it's very fascinating to me because we're in California. We're very close to big entertainment hubs, and it's always interesting to find out that there's little towns here and there where people constantly come from. But my point being is that you, in a very short amount of time, have created something really, really cool for yourself. But your roots were in songwriting, Ed Sheeran, like you were talking about folk music. So then from that point on, how did your music evolve? Like, what did you start experimenting with? What other styles of music impacted your, I guess your style is what I'm trying to get at. Like, what did you start getting into that started changing it from songwriting to where it currently is now?
So coming off of like that acoustic style, I was best friends with this guy Quentin, who was a rapper, and all of a sudden I started writing hooks and choruses for like his raps, and so all of a sudden I got like thrown into like R&B, which I had always loved R&B and listened to it, but I'd never like tried to create it. But for a good minute there, I all of a sudden flipped and wanted to be an R&B artist. I've gone through a lot of different genres in my career thus far, where I'll dive in and I'll want to do something else, and I'll dive in and want to do something else. And I think that's all a part of finding your sound and what you actually want to stick with. Because it's really hard as a musician to differentiate like what music style you want to create and what music style you just love listening to.
Yeah.
And so after I did R&B for a while, then I started doing a little bit more pop style. And that didn't last super long until I kind of got thrown into the electronic industry by like a few collabs I randomly wrote. And that just kind of started spiraling into more and more electronic collabs. And then all of a sudden I was just doing like full electronic music, which was kind of just very random and unexpected to be like thrown into that and like stick in it for so long.
Yeah.
But after doing that for a while, I'm kind of finally figuring out the way to blend all the certain styles that I love and all the certain styles that I want to make into like my one sound, which is finally kind of starting to happen in my solo music. But it's kind of a mix of all of the below, everything that I just said. It's kind of like it has R&B influence, has acoustic influence, it has electronic influence, it has pop influence, it has indie and alternative influence. But it's just basically whatever naturally comes out of me now is kind of like a blend of all the music things that I've been through and all the genres that I've kind of messed around with.
Yeah. And clearly there's something very unique with the way that you approach. I don't want to call it songwriting because I believe that it's definitely more than that. Like, honestly believe songwriters have such a huge impact in the way that the music industry is shaped. But based on what you basically just told me and the way you have approached your music career, it sounds like to me like you've been presented with a new musical challenge. We can call it that, where someone has given you, or at least asked if you wanted to participate in something that you necessarily weren't an expert in, but obviously you've heard of it or something like that. And you have you basically dove in and came out on the other side pretty much with something cool. What I'm curious about is mentally and creatively, how did you specifically approach, like, let's say when you started with hip hop, right? How did you approach some of those hooks when you started collaborating with your friend or these artists in hip hop and R&B, especially when you had no experience? What was your approach to it? And I'm sure that's a bit of a broad question, But I ask that in that specific way because since I'm a drummer and, you know, you're a very talented performer, I feel like we kind of both understand this in genres. As you kind of start to jump from genre to genre, there are people who are more, I don't know how to call it, but I guess purists, you can say. And it's almost like that genre needs to be earned. And then it's very difficult to kind of bounce around. But based on what you've done in a very short amount of time, to me, it seems like you might be skilled in this very rare art form of jumping from genre to genre. So I really am curious if you've thought of a different way to approach songwriting, or how it is that you kind of sit down when someone offers you something new, and how do you creatively, collectively approach it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're definitely not wrong about the purist thing. That's pretty funny.
It's a very real thing, by the way, guys. Like, it's very difficult to kind of jump from genre to genre. It's not easy.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you by any means. So the way I guess that I kind of approached it, especially going into like the hip hop R&B side, was I don't even know. It's weird. It's kind of like the lyrical side was far different than what I had been writing about before. Because like I said, I was making Ed Sheeran acoustic. I was talking about love and heartbreak and like all these like very happy, and at this time, this is the beginning of my career, very, very like corny lyricism. And then being thrown into this R&B world where I'm all of a sudden supposed to be like getting sexual and talking about this and that. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So like lyrically, it was very, what's a good word for it? Exaggerated. Lyrically, it was very exaggerated because a lot of the things I'd say I hadn't necessarily experienced firsthand. But I knew that was kind of in the world that you were supposed to talk about that, which kind of slowly started to decrease because I realized like you don't have to talk about the certain things in the song to make it fit in that, you know?
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of what helped me fuse everything together too, is that I wasn't trying to like, oh, this sounds too R&B or this sounds too pop. It's just kind of whatever works. And so at that point, I kind of started just letting my like brain and my mouth, for lack of a better term, do whatever it wanted. Like melodies coming out, whatever melody I heard to it, doesn't matter if it didn't fit the genre. If the melody came out and it sounded nice, cool, let's run with it. And the lyrics were just kind of anything that I was thinking of at that moment, anything that like I feel like came to me through the instrumental. Because I never just come up with lyrics like on the spot to silence and then put them in a song. Like it always comes to me through the instrumental, through the instrumentation that's being created on the song. And so I think that's kind of what's helped me as well with any of the other things is like First Time, for example. That song, I feel like that hook and that pre-chorus and basically any sort of those melodies at all are not very electronic in nature. Like it's not very future-based top line sounding if you listen to just like that a cappella.
Yeah.
I feel like it was very like pop influenced, I would say, but there were also different kind of like runs and vocal things that I felt were very R&B. But I also feel like that being fused fit on that instrumental somehow. And that's what kind of made it stand out apart from just your normal everyday, like top line, I would call it, on like a song. But it's because I wasn't looking at that song or any other songs as like, this needs to be played at raves everywhere. And this needs to be about this. And it needs to sound in this key and like this like reverberation effect on it to give it that sound. Like it was just like, what am I feeling to this instrumental? What melodies am I feeling? How am I feeling when I'm hearing it? And that's just kind of what came out. And I mean, it works sometimes, hopefully.
Well, I mean, I would argue it works quite a lot. And here's the thing that I'm curious about, because I would argue that most songwriters, and I'm not going to speak like I'm a songwriter. Like I have experience, but I'm not a professional by any means. But it's definitely a different art form from, let's say, playing drums, which is what I do. And what's curious to me is that you were not only brave enough to approach a new genre when you weren't even in it, you very quickly realized that a better way to approach it was to not necessarily create rules for yourself in the way that you thought of, but to be very mindful of what you were feeling towards a song. Now, that sounds like a very broad statement, but I personally believe it's a very hard thing to do, especially when anyone who's learning music, when you sit down and you're trying to create something, it's just so easy to put on albums that you like and just try and emulate because, I mean, that's all you can really do. But at some point, I believe a lot of the greats learn how to balance that difference between taking inspiration and then being able to kind of shut that off and listen to what's coming out and prioritize what's coming out of you. So what I'm curious about is, was it a natural progression for you to sort of start a genre by like emulating a little bit and then being able to transition to more about what you were feeling? Or was it a difficult transition? Like, did it take you a long time to really like start listening to what you felt? Or was it a pretty instantaneous transition? Like, all right, I kind of know what they're going for. Here's what I feel this song needs.
I think it was more on the quicker side. I don't think I really had too many battles with myself over it because at the end of the day, I did just want to make what I wanted to make. Obviously, you have people saying, hey, like coming up with different ideas for this and that, and they want this changed or whatever. But overall, like, you really have to give it what you want. And if you don't, you're not really giving it your true artistry. You know what I mean? If you're just writing something to sound how you think the genre should sound, then you're just jumping into the cesspool of people in that realm, and you're not really going to sound any different. I think as an artist, like all the major artists, whether or not people are now following them or whether or not like a lot of people sound like them, more likely than not, they came into their genre or their scene different than everybody else.
Right.
And that's what made them explode. That's what made them who they are, you know? You don't tend to hear people sound like everybody else and explode. You can have success, but like, you don't hear like somebody come in and sound just like everybody else, doing the exact same thing as everybody else, and all of a sudden become an overnight sensation because it's nothing that the people haven't heard before, you know?
Yeah. Well, here's what I'm curious about then. And I'm glad that you say that, by the way, because it's absolutely true. A lot of successful musicians in the past have said very similar things. I think that pattern is very true across the board. You normally see all the legends and all the greats were people that were very, very different at first, and that difference became the norm. What I'm curious about, though, do you believe that ability to be different, to me, it sounds like it's a very natural ability that you have. Again, kind of studying and hearing how you were describing your career so far. From my own experience, have been around a lot of very talented musicians in my career. I've been around many talented studio guys and bands and all that. And the older I get, the more I see that the ability to be quote unquote different, it's a lot more rare than I thought it was. And so meeting someone like you and getting a chance to pick your brain, I see this pattern that you basically understood how to prioritize what you heard inside of you. For me, what I'm curious about is, where does that come from? Does that come from maybe the fact that you were raised by your parents, or from your environment, the fact that maybe you were in a town that didn't have a lot of musical influence per se, so you were forced to figure yourself out? Like, that's what I'm genuinely curious about, because I could be wrong, by the way. Feel free to correct me. But it comes so easy to you. I mean, am I wrong in assuming that? I think you're very good at being able to do something like that.
Well, thank you.
I kind of, well, I mean, it's true. Like, I mean, and I'm glad that you brought up First Time a little bit earlier, because I have heard that song many times, but there's that acoustic version with just the piano, and it's just such a solid song on its own. And that's the makings of a great song, not just a genre song, a song period. And you, in my opinion, have been able to master that very early on. And I'm curious if it's something you practiced, or if it just comes to you, or if it's a little bit of both. I'm not sure, but it's truly remarkable is what I'm saying.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a decent mix of everything, but I guess my main thing that I could say is I think that I have a decent ear for music, um, just generally speaking, which I believe is genetic because my dad's the exact same way. Um, but I believe that obviously there's a lot of influences everywhere from different musicians and from my parents and from all that kind of stuff. But basically, I would I would say that part of it would be me being stubborn and just wanting to make what I want to make.
So the key
But
is just being very, very stubborn, huh?
just be hard headed and you'll survive.
And you'll succeed. You'll be different enough. Oh,
Yeah.
I feel like there's something to that, though, man. I feel like there's something to liking an idea so much that you just got to stick with it. Is that something that's very normal in a lot of your sessions? That you're very much, I'm not going to say you're hard headed. I'm saying like that you're very much, you fight for your ideas.
Yeah, I mean, if it's something that I definitely believe in, I will for sure fight for it. If there's things that are, iffy, I'll say, um, then it's kind of up to having a happy medium between everybody, whoever's in the session, kind of. But if there's certain things that I love, um, I fight for it. Like for example, bringing up first time again, and this is just such a little piece, but like the ooh in the background of the chorus before, like to fill in that space, the ooh, that thing,
Yeah.
they didn't want to keep that in,
Huh.
and I was like, no, that's arguably the most melodic part of the song. We have to keep it in. It fills in that space so well, and I like fought for that ooh, and and so like that's a very little example, but like there's certain things that I'm like, no, I know this would work. I know this sounds good. Like, and the thing is, I think there's a difference between doing things correctly and doing things that sound good, like in songwriting and production and mixing and mastering and any kind of thing like that. Like you can do things by the book. You can do things, you can't see me, but I'm putting up air quotes. You can do things correctly, air quotes. That doesn't mean that it's any better than the version that's not correct, that sounds good. I think music isn't a visual or scientific thing on what sounds good or what doesn't sound good. I think it's completely audible. It's what you hear, it's what you feel. And so if I'm writing something or I'm hearing something that I know sounds good, even if it's not by the book, the formula of a hit pop song or a hit electronic song or whatever, if it sounds good and I can hear that and I know that, I have to trust that other people are going to feel the same way and that it's not just going to sit in that same realm of every basic song that you hear in any genre.
Interesting. Do you ever second guess yourself? Like in the sense where you mentioned how sometimes there are some things that are iffy. Do you ever sit there and double, like second guess yourself, especially if everybody else thinks it's kind of iffy? Do you ever just sit there and linger on it? Or if something isn't hitting, are you pretty much just, all right, it's not working, get rid of it?
It depends on how I feel about it, honestly. If I really like it and everybody else doesn't like it, I'm usually like, I'm more lenient on changing it, but I'm not like, all right, throw it away. Because if I really like it, especially if it's something from my project, I'm more like, I really like this,
Yeah.
Just because you're in a room with, I'm making up a number here. I've never been in a session with this many people, but if you're in a room with 8 people and 7 people hate it, that doesn't mean that 7 out of 8 people in the world are going to hate it. That just, you could just be in a room with 7 people that don't agree with your vision, but everybody else could,
Yeah.
It's very hard to let something go by that you like internally really feel is what's best or what's correct, because I'm like, if you guys don't like that, or if whoever doesn't like it, that's fine. We can change it if we come up with something better.
Yeah.
But if those 7 people come up with something that they all love, but I don't think it's better, it's really up to if you want to jeopardize your craft and your project at that point, or if you want to try to appeal to everybody.
Yeah. I'm curious, has there been a moment where you were very, where you thought something wouldn't work, but it actually ended up working and you were pleasantly surprised? Sometimes it's hard to remember when you're on the spot like that, but I'm curious if there has been a moment where you just felt like, okay, this one time I might have misjudged this moment?
I can't say I have one of those moments at the top of my head. I'm sure there is. I'm not saying I'm never wrong.
It's that
But there's
stubbornness,
nothing
man.
that's
It's that
standing
stubbornness.
out to me. I know.
Did you ever see the Clive Davis documentary that was on Netflix like a couple months ago, maybe last year at some point? Did you ever get a chance to see that?
I have not yet.
Clive Davis, by the way, for those of you guys who may not know, I'm going to try and give a very quick little bio. Clive Davis is arguably one of the best A&R people in the music industry. He's a legend. I believe he's still alive. But anyways, this documentary talks about a lot of the legends, a lot of the music legends that everybody knows. You know, Whitney Houston, I think Michael Jackson a little bit. God, all the names are escaping me right now. There's so many. But anyways, my point being is that there's this guy who was very, very much responsible for a lot of the music that we know of, especially through the 80s and the 90s and even in hip hop. And his approach, being a business guy, first of all, I don't think he was a musician, but he was very much similar to you, where like when something would sound right, everybody around him, and I'm not going to say everybody, but the traditional way of doing things would oppose his views. You know, they very much would be like, no, we need to wait, or we need to not do it that way, blah, blah, blah. And he would go ahead and go his own way. And a lot of the legendary songs that we know of came because of those decisions that he made. Like the one that comes to mind is Whitney Houston's "And I Will Always Love You." I can't sing like you, man, but that's basically the song. And what's interesting about that story is that I guess the demo was given to him by some of the songwriters, and it was just a demo. It was just like a rough draft for this movie that Whitney Houston was in, and they were going to add more instruments, and they had samples of some of the instruments they were going to add. And Clive was very adamant that no, that song in its rawest form was the best it could ever be, that it was just perfect because Whitney Houston's emotions would cut through. But the label and other people were like, no, wait for the full orchestra and whatnot. That's the real version. And he hung up the phone, turned back around, and released the song to the press and to other people without letting anybody know. And that's the song that we have today. That song that everybody knows was a rough draft. It wasn't even finished. I believe, that the song that we hear is not a finished song. It was just a draft version, and everybody was pissed, but it clearly worked. I don't know. To me, it's kind of funny because I see a pattern between all these people that are able to make that choice once they trust their gut. Has there ever been any fear of failure coming from your end? Like when you really back something, you ever fear like, oh shit, this might actually really fall on its face and I'm going to look like an idiot?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, failure crosses my mind 24 hours out of the day, you know? It's definitely something that drives you, or at least drives me. But yeah, I mean, I've felt like that about almost everything. There's always going to be a piece, even if I'm like so proud of whatever the work that I just did was, like, just it's my favorite piece and blah, blah, blah. Like, there's still going to be that little piece of me that's really nervous that it could not be as good as I think it is, or that it doesn't go as well as I want it to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely something that will always be with me for sure.
How do you overcome it though? Do you just ignore it, or do you just say, "Hey, I trust my own judgment," though?
Yeah, I ignore it.
That's stubbornness.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, I don't know. The thing about art and creating is like, I could think it's the best thing in the world. That doesn't mean anybody else is going to like it. Or everybody else can think it's the best thing in the world. That doesn't mean I'm going to like it. And so as an artist, the only thing you can really do is put out what you love and what you want to put out, regardless of what people are going to like. Because at the end of the day, if you're not doing it for yourself, you're not doing it for the right reasons. And so it's really just kind of overcoming that fear of, it doesn't matter if everybody else hates it. It doesn't matter if the song gets 30 plays and nobody cares about it, because I love it and I'm proud of the art that I created.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of how I feel about it in that realm of like, there's songs of mine that did not do very well that are my favorite songs of mine. Doesn't mean they're bad songs. It's just music is subjective. Everything about music is subjective. And you can never appeal to everyone, and everyone's going to fail at some point. And so it's kind of just taking your failures and kind of brushing them off and keeping working on your craft until hopefully something that you're creating resonates with the rest of the world.
Yeah. In fact, I believe that most artists in general will argue that their least favorite songs are some that became the most famous, and that some of the best songs that they've ever written, no one's ever heard of them. I think I was listening to an interview with Maroon 5, Adam Levine, and he joked how every album they've made, the songs he hates the most are the ones that everybody loves. You know, and I feel like that's kind of the same across the board. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that.
100%, yeah.
I don't know what it is. But it's something that is kind of a food for thought. But here's one of the cool things I actually respect about you. You said something very important that resonates to me, especially because I am a self-taught drummer. I think after a couple years of playing, I taught myself how to read and other things. But for the most part, I taught myself how to play music by myself, by ear, and all of that. And you said something that really resonated with me because I felt like I lived through it too. And still to this day, I still live through it. And it's that idea of trusting yourself and trusting the ability that you know what to do, even if like nobody else believes that you can do it. And again, it's cheesy. But if I'm not mistaken, I feel like you and I were on the same boat, right? I think you were self-taught too, right? Especially when it comes to keys and stuff.
Yeah, my grandmother helped me learn some of the basics of piano. But I really took especially that and learned by ear and kind of self-taught. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Did that ever, when you started playing more professionally and you started being on stage and all of that, did that ever, I don't know, like trip you up a little bit? It's a big difference practicing at home and jumping up on stage and doing it, right? It's a very big step up. I'm curious for you, did that ever like kind of like trip you up a little bit? Like, oh shit, like I don't know how to read, or this is my first time playing keys. Like, did that ever trip you up a little bit the first couple times you did it?
Yeah, definitely. Especially starting this tour that, I mean, I'm technically on right now, but technically not because of all the circumstances.
Yep.
The I tour. Yeah, for sure. Especially starting that because I hadn't played piano live since my high school graduation.
Wow.
Which was in 2014. So it had been a while, to say the least. And yeah, I mean, it was definitely very stressful because you go from playing at home and you know everything and everything's going well and all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden you're on a stage in front of thousands of people and your heart's racing and your hands are a little shaky, and then these people are screaming and like you can't hear this certain part, and you're like, it gets a little hectic. The best thing for me is just like to not think about it, because I'll overthink and be like looking at the keys. I'm like, shit, am I supposed to press this key or this key on this part?
Oh man.
Like it's like something I'll mess up, and I'm like, okay, I swear it's this one. And if you overthink it, odds are you're going to hit the wrong key and go, shit.
Dude, how true.
You know?
How true. Did that actually happen? Did you actually like fuck
up?
I've
hit wrong keys all the time, dude. It's just kind of a part of it. And like after a while I realized nobody in the audience is like a music connoisseur that's going to get on your ass because you hit a B flat instead of a B. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to like be like, oh, he messed up a key, you know? And at the same time, like it's all at this point like muscle memory. Like if I sit up there and I close my eyes and I do not think about what I'm playing, my body's going to play the song.
Yeah. Oh, dude, that's
but
the
if
best
I'm sitting
feeling.
there thinking about it, it can go awry.
Dude, it's the best feeling when you're able to not think about it. Like it definitely for me, I feel like it's 50-50. There are some days where I'm on stage and I have to think about it, but there's other days, half of the days, where I'm just chill. I just kind of go with the flow, and I'm able to do all this stuff that I never even thought I was able to do when I don't think about it. It's a weird fucking mind trip. But you know what's funny about what you said, which is absolutely 100% true, especially for some people who might be considering picking up an instrument or something. I was at a show not that long ago. And again, I'm going to preface this by saying I'm a mostly like a pop rock drummer. But one of the things I did learn early on from you, very similar to what you said, was that there's rarely somebody in the audience that knows a lot about music. Like, I'm sure there's people who are enthusiasts or hobbyists, but there isn't like a musician connoisseur usually in the audience, or at least a whole bunch of them. And very recently, a couple months ago, I was at a concert. I'm not going to say, who was playing or whatever, but there was this guitarist who was just jamming, and the whole show was fucking great. And there was a certain point, like I would say towards the middle of their set, where this person just starts soloing a half step down of the song, right?
Oh God.
Right. And again, for those of you guys who aren't musicians, I'm talking about like a scale. Every song is like they have a certain couple notes that are correct, and you can shift those. And if you go like one half step away, it's like the wrong key, right? So I heard it, right? But I like looked around me, and everyone was just like cheering and headbanging, and it was like everyone was in it, and it just made me laugh because I was enjoying it too. Like I was in the audience, I was loving the whole vibe, and I just laughed because it reminded me of some of those moments in the past where I've been nervous as fuck to go on stage. I'm like, fuck, what if I hit the wrong cymbal? What if I hit the wrong thing? What if I speed up too much? That whole thing. And here I'm watching this guy do like a 2-minute solo in the wrong key. And no one noticed. Like no one fucking noticed. In fact, I feel like people loved it more. So it's like that weird oxymoron, as musicians, you kind of, it's a weird thing to go through, but I think, I don't know, I feel like not worrying about it does kind of help you perform better. But I don't know, do you feel like you've gotten better over the years of actually playing live now? Like, do you feel like you know a little more, even though you're still letting go and kind of going with the flow? Do you feel like your knowledge has increased a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, practice makes as close to perfect as you can get. Practice makes better. That's what I like to say, because nobody can ever be perfect.
Yeah.
But it's all relative to how much you do it. The more you do it, the better you're going to be, and that stands for anything. And so, being on stage, like starting like the first part of the tour this year, like first night. It was like the first section was 2 weeks. We were on the bus, and it was a show every single night. We didn't have any days off.
That's tough, man.
And first night, like super nervous, messed up a few parts, didn't play as good as I wanted to. End of the 2 weeks, I felt like I could do that like with my hands behind my back. It's impossible because it's a piano, but you get what I'm saying.
I don't know. I'm sure you could find a way.
Yeah, I'll just face slam the keyboard. But yeah, it definitely gets easier. It's just, it's hard to prepare yourself for something that you're not doing. Like, it's hard. You can practice as much as you want, like playing piano at home, but it's really hard to practice it in front of a live audience of, however many people.
Yeah. Because you need an audience. You need an audience to practice that.
It's like, I rock climb as well. And so I can like train bouldering up to like 10, 15 feet and be doing great. But doing that same problem 50 feet in the air in Joshua Tree is like a whole different thing. Like, you can't train for that because you're training your muscles and everything. But when you get that high up on the rock, like your body starts reacting differently and your brain's reacting differently, and it makes everything different.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, you can kind of do as much as you can, but at a certain point you have to just let what happens happen.
Yeah. But I'm sure you've noticed that when you're doing that, like using the rock climbing or bouldering as an example, I'm sure you've noticed that at a certain point, once you reach the point where you've practiced and you kind of reach that threshold where now it's becoming semi-scary, semi-dangerous, like I've never done this before, your adrenaline kicks in like majorly, or at least for me it does. And I'm sure to a lot of other musicians it does too. But for me, when my adrenaline has kicked in the past, it's not like I'm losing control. It isn't like I don't know what I'm doing. I just don't feel all there, if that kind of makes sense. Like I kind of focus in, and my body is doing most of the work, and my mind takes a bit of a backseat. Even though I could be freaking out and I could be doing all this stuff, the very few moments that it has happened to me, I feel like my brain is taking a backseat. Does that happen to you in rock climbing and also like in scary music and situations? Have you ever felt that, like the adrenaline take over?
Yeah, 100%. I'm a highly adrenaline filled person anyway. And so, yeah, I definitely have that happen a good amount of the time, where there's times where I'm on stage and like I'll like get done with a song and all of a sudden like my brain will kind of kick back in and I'll go, I don't really remember just singing that song. Like, I'm surprised I didn't mess up those lyrics or like that piano. It's almost like when you're driving and then all of a sudden you come to and you don't remember how you got as far as you were. And you're like, wait, did I just drive all those streets here? Like, it's kind of like that. But yeah, 100%.
Dude, it's a weird ass feeling, but it's one of those things where I wish I could control. Like, I'm not even sure if it is a thing where you can control your adrenaline and like have it kick in on command. I don't think it is. I could be wrong.
I mean, probably with drugs.
Probably. I'm sure. Yeah, there's definitely a way, but I wish naturally that there was a way to kind of get it to kick in, because obviously I feel like I've done a lot of cool stuff, but I do feel like a lot of the coolest things I've done have been under adrenaline, just because your body doesn't have time to think. Part of me wonders if that's like a key to actually be able to, I don't know, like leap forward. You know what I mean? Like if you're doing constantly scary things, like if one day you're not used to performing in front of thousands, but then you're just like, fuck it, you get the opportunity, you do it. And then the next day you do something even bigger. I wonder if like that's the key, putting yourself in situations where your adrenaline takes over.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the things I'm curious about is you're always doing cool stuff. I know that you're still on tour, but I want to know more about kind of where your mind is headed now. Because if I've learned anything from this conversation and your history a bit, you're always trying new things and you're always challenging yourself to a new genre or something new that makes you better, I'm curious, is there something that you're working on right now, or what is it that's on your mind that you're trying to challenge yourself with? Or maybe you're just chilling. I don't know. I'm just curious. I don't think you're chilling, though. It doesn't sound like you're chilling.
Not entirely. I'm commonly not chilling. Even when I'm chilling, dude, I'm not chilling, for real. It's like, even when I'm just hanging out, I'm thinking about something.
Yeah, he's playing video games, getting headshots left and right, playing Call of Duty.
Yeah. Yeah, but also thinking about what I need to change in that mix later.
It's a good combo.
Yeah, I mean, musically speaking, right now, I'm working on an EP, which is my first body of music solo in like a long time, 2.5 years, I think.
Really?
So, and this is like the most proud I've been of a body of work in a while, because that's really starting to like hone in my style instead of just like one specific genre. Like, I feel like I've been able to blend in a lot of my influences into this project. And so, I mean, I've been working on that from a songwriting spectrum. I produced 2 of the songs on it. So I've been working on that spectrum of trying to get better at production. I've been mixing the songs to send to mastering and stuff. So I've been really trying to be as a part of the project as I can. But yeah, I mean, from any spectrum, music and not, I feel like I'm always trying to be the best version of myself I can be. I feel like everybody should be doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm curious. Has like basically producing and mixing your own stuff, is that something that you've always done, or is this like the transitioning to the producing and mixing side? Is that something that you just kind of started a little while ago?
So technically speaking, I've done it for a while, but a lot of it was like I was producing stuff pretty early on in my career, trying, but it was not up to par, I'll say.
When is it ever up to par? You know what I mean?
That's fair. Nothing's ever up to par, honestly. But yeah, I've been doing it for a little bit. I took a big backseat for a while because I just wasn't happy with what I was creating. But coming back into this, I just kind of really wanted to see what I can do. And it was almost like I just was trying to start ideas to write to, and I wasn't planning on finishing them. But then I would dive so deep in it that all of a sudden I produced like a huge project, and I was like, whoa, maybe I should keep this, And then mixing, I'm new to mixing correctly, I would say.
That's a good way to put it, yes.
Yeah, when I was mixing before, it was just kind of like, oh, I produced this, or like I did all the vocals. Does it sound good? Cool. Bounce it and we'll upload it. And now it's like, okay, we need to make sure this is done correctly. We need to get all the stems out and put them in these specific folders and do this and do that. But yeah, doing it correctly and up to a level where like collaborators and producers and professionals are like, yes, this sounds good is new.
Dude, that's a crowning achievement, by the way, to be able to do that. Like, people don't know the struggle of getting a good mix. It's
slightly hard.
It's an art form in itself, to be honest with you. Like, it's interesting how much people don't realize, like, mixing and producing, how much that actually, takes part into creating what we hear. And I've tried my hand at mixing many times. I'm obviously better now than I was when I started. But even to this day, man, like, there's just some things that I hear that I don't understand how somebody can get something to sound so crisp, how someone can separate the bass so well from, like, the mids. And it's just, it eludes me. And I just sit there very frustrated half the time just staring at a mixer board being like, dude, how is this even a thing? But it's something that you have to work at, and it's very difficult. But once you get it right, and if a professional can hear it and tell you did a great job, that's a feat. It's a very well accomplished feat.
Yeah, for sure. It's nice having somebody be like, yeah, no, this actually sounds really clean. It's like, really? I did good.
What would describe the genre that you feel like you're evolving into, or that is very close to you?
It's hard because there's, like, you can give it like a name of one of the genres, but then it's like also missing certain elements when you think about that genre.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So, like, I would say it's in the, like, indie pop, alt pop realm now, because it has a lot of indie alternative, like, styles of, like, real drums and a lot of electric guitars and, like, stuff like that, while also being very pop and not, like, super indie.
Yeah.
But then there's also a lot of electronic elements. I love, like, the synthwave 80s
I love that
sound,
too.
And drum patterns and stuff like that. So it's somewhere between indie pop and, like, that synthwave electronic.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain because, like, when you say it, it's like, okay, there might be a lot of weird elements in that, but when you listen to it, it doesn't sound like anything crazy, weird, experimental.
Yeah.
It's just blending together all the things that I like, that are like electric guitar, acoustic guitar, real bass, real drums, synths, 80s synth sounds and drum patterns, and then just with whatever melodic vocal I come up with on top of it. And I don't know, I'm really stoked on it. I feel like it sounds very me, and it's not easy to put in a box, and that's what I like. I don't want to be put in a box very easily.
Okay, that's what it is. Because my next question was going to be, again, to kind of expand on what you were just saying, but I feel like you just answered it by that very brief statement. What makes it just unique to you? And I think it's the fact that you can't be put in a box. Honestly, based on what you've told me and your history, it seems like you just enjoy that. You enjoy being able to kind of stick your foot in wherever you want and be able to learn from it and do it. And then when you feel like, all right, I want to learn from another box, and you kind of stick your foot in another box, and then you create this bigger box. I feel like that's kind of what you like doing.
Definitely. I like being genreless, for lack of a better term. Because if all of a sudden I start only making electronic music, if I come out with a pop song, people are going to tell me I'm off the wagon. People are going to say, what is he doing? It's like when Lil Wayne came out with his rock album. You remember that?
Yeah, I do.
He just randomly came out with what, Prom Queen was the song, and just dropped a full rock album. And everybody was like, what are you doing, dude? Now, Prom Queen was a bop. I'll give him that. But that it was just so random and, like, didn't fit. Like, he gained hip hop fans. He was not going to, like, appeal to the rock scene. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just like being able to create what I want. I think as an artist, like, if you told, like, any major artist, like if you told Picasso, you can only paint this style, he wouldn't be who he is.
True.
Because he wouldn't have broken these boundaries and done whatever he wanted. He would just be, oh, he just does this style and that's it. And he doesn't create anything else. Like, that's what it is. And I don't like being in that box of, no, this is too R&B, you can't do that. No, this is too electronic, you can't do that. It's like, I just want to create what I want to create. I think art is all about creation, and I don't want to limit myself when I could be coming up with my best work or somebody else's favorite work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I could write a song that appeals to a certain amount of people or just a certain one person that like changes their life. But I wouldn't have written that song if I kept myself in this other little box of like only writing upbeat, like electronic top lines, you know?
Interesting.
And so, yeah, I like being like that.
Well, I mean, I love that that's where you're positioning yourself, because personally, from my experience, and again, anyone can disagree. You can prove me wrong. I think it's subjective. But I see that the choice to become your own individual, and like we were talking earlier, being different and just doing the things that sound right to you normally sound different or kind of odd to a lot of other people. But it's ultimately what makes you stand out and is the easiest path to becoming like a legend and a standout. But I also will hear the other side of the argument. A lot of artists' strategy, not everybody, but a lot of when you get artist development deals or something like that, the strategy tends to be align yourself on this path. And then once you get to this certain milestone, then break away and do what you want. That tends to be, I mean, I feel like you know what I'm talking about. I feel like that tends to be the strategy for a lot of people. And you're choosing to not necessarily align yourself with that narrow of a path. I'm not saying you don't have a specific path, but it seems to me like you're very consciously choosing to step away from the concept of just choosing that narrow road and from the get-go putting your flag down on what you are, even if nobody knows what that is yet.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Are you by any chance, and again, I'm just kind of curious, but are you intimidated at all by the fact that it could be a little harder to put your name in where it belongs? Because again, the reason why most artist development deals and labels and stuff suggest that is because it is a little easier on paper, but it's also very formulaic. It's very expected. It's very routine, like it's not different, and so things that are different tend to be a little harder. And I'm curious if you are intimidated by that at all. I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I'm genuinely curious.
I would say no. I definitely understand that, and I know that it's harder, and I know that it comes with its own issues and whatnot. But I don't want to be just a well-known artist in this genre that, oh, you've heard his music? Yeah, he's like the pop artist, or he's the this artist. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. He's had that song and da, da, da. Like, I want to be in one way or another, like a game changer. I want to like bring something to this industry, into this world that no one else could. And I don't say that in like a cocky, like I'm the best, I'm going to do this kind of way, I just like, I truly hope that whatever I create and whatever I put out will somehow affect enough people to make it different enough that it like had a positive impact on either the industry or their life or some section of the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't think that you need to be known by a genre if you're known by your art. Like if somebody says, and this is like more just pure like celebrity status, which isn't necessarily what I'm saying, but if somebody says Justin Bieber, they're not going to go, oh yeah, what kind of music does he make? Somebody says Michael Jackson, they don't go Michael Jackson, the pop guy. It's more like their art is their art. It speaks for itself. And so that's my goal, more or less, is to just kind of universally be known for my art rather than what section or genre my art should be like labeled as.
I love that, man. I honestly could not have said that better myself. And it makes absolute sense when you really think about it. The greats of the greats are not known by a genre per se. I feel like many people could try and argue that, but the truth of the matter is, and using Michael Jackson, perfect fucking example. It's just, he's him, no matter what. His art is his, and that's all it is. And that's how people recognize it. And to have that as a goal, man, I tip my hat to you, because that's very, very good to have, and to be able to be aware of that early on. I guess I'm just very happy and refreshed to hear that you respect yourself and believe in yourself enough to value yourself enough to know what you are. And I think that deserves, like, it deserves to be commended. There you go. That's what I was.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely, man. All right. Well, I mean, to kind of tie things off here, when is your new music out? Like, are you going to be releasing it full album, full EP, or are you going to be releasing single after single? What are you going to be doing?
So I am releasing my first single off the EP called Don't Forget. Well, right now it's next month. I don't know when this is coming out, but it'll be May 15th.
Cool.
And then I cannot say the date for the EP yet, but it will be following shortly after that first single.
Oh, very cool. Are you going to be supporting this new music right away, or are you going to support it a little bit later in the year?
It's seeming like later because of everything going on. I originally was planning on taking my few months off that were in summer and doing a few things for support for this, but it's not looking so great right now.
Right. Everyone's plans have been pushed back by like 3 months.
Yeah, it's kind of all up in the air depending on like what happens. I don't know what's going to happen, you know? So right now, I mean, I'm just trying to put this project out as fast as I can so that everybody in quarantine and everybody on lockdown and everybody having like this weird time in their life at least has something to listen to, you know, something new and something that I'm really proud of, and hopefully that excites people to come see it live when all this craziness is over.
I love it, man. Dude, I'm really excited for all the stuff that you're going to be doing. I'm really happy because, again, I'm very honored that I get the chance to, you know, talk to some people that I genuinely admire and learn from them and talk to them. But I feel like you definitely have become one of my favorites just because I understand to some degree where you're coming from. But I also feel like I learned a little bit about your drive and your passion. Like I can feel it. And that's not something I'm exaggerating. I feel like it's very important to note when I feel like somebody has a good head on their shoulder and like they're very much ready to plow through and get something done, because it's rare. I don't think people realize how rare that is, to be able to have a good head on your shoulder. Having good work ethic exists quite a bit in this industry, but being able to understand why you're doing it and have that belief in yourself, it's not very common. And so I'm very, very happy that I got a chance to discover that firsthand, man. And I'm really looking forward to everything that you're going to achieve, man. It's going to be great.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
All right, that was my conversation with Dylan Matthew. Definitely one of my favorites. Now, as promised, let's go ahead and listen to his single, Don't Forget.
Locking myself inside my room again to stay away. 'Cause every time I find a way to end up at your feet. Oh. Do you miss me like I miss you? Or am I just a silhouette, a shadow dancing around your bed? Call me crazy, but I can't fake it. I swear I'll try the best I can. And don't you forget, don't forget everything that I went through for you. Don't you forget when you said we were forever two. Don't you forget, don't forget. What am I doing here? I'm standing right outside your place. So many questions that I have, like why'd you run away without a trace? Oh, do you miss me like I miss you? Or am I just a silhouette, a shadow dancing around your bed? Call me crazy, but I can't fake it. I swear I've tried the best I can. And don't you forget, don't forget everything that I went through for you. Don't you forget, don't forget everything that I went through for you. Don't you forget, don't forget when you said we were forever two. Don't you forget, don't forget everything that I went through for you. Don't you forget, don't forget when you said we were forever two. Don't you forget, don't forget.
Oh man, what a great song. Mr. Dylan Matthew, I'm very grateful for you for coming on the show. I want to thank Dylan's managers and his team for helping to facilitate this interview. It's definitely one for the books and one of my favorites. And I hope that you, the listeners, I hope that you learned something new today. I hope that you feel inspired by Dylan's story. I know that I definitely am. And the goal at the end of the day for this show is to help you become creative, to help you find that inner passion that all of us have so that you can find your own unique path. There is not one single path to success or to even creating awesome music like Dylan is doing. As you guys can clearly see, his path is very unique. He knows where he wants to be. And I urge you to definitely explore and see where you want to go and pursue that without any apologies. And if I can do that today, if this conversation inspires you to get up, make music your own way, then I know I did a good job. And hey, if you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to stay tuned in to this show because I have tons of interviews always coming every single month. I interview some of the coolest musicians that I can find, a lot of up-and-comers too, so that you can explore that process of making your own music and trying to break into the industry. And I try and provide all aspects of creative thinking, and I really hope that you enjoy these conversations and feel inspired to do your own thing. So make sure to subscribe and stay tuned in because I have tons of great content coming your way.